Welcome to NTT's celebration of World Emoji Day. Thank you for joining us here in the Experience Center in San Francisco and on LinkedIn Live. My name is Megan Dahlgren. I'm a vice president in the global marketing team and general manager of the Experience Center. For those of you who don't know NTT, we're a global technology company. Our 330,000 employees provide technology services and innovation, support our clients, grow their business, and develop new business models. But even more than that, we're particularly committed to innovation that contributes to a more sustainable and harmonious society, which is why we're especially proud of the $3.6 billion a year that we invest to fund projects like the one that invented the emoji. Today, I am delighted to introduce Yi-Yang Liu, our collaborator who's helped us to celebrate World Emoji Day today. She's named Most Creative Person in Business by Fast Company and is the creator of the dumpling and boba tea emojis. We are so delighted to collaborate with Yi-Yang. She's helped us convert our Experience Center here in San Francisco into a modern art museum by remixing masterpieces such as Leonardo da Vinci's The Mona Lisa, Hokusai's Great Wave of Kanagwa, and Henri Matisse's The Dance with modern-day emojis. On the panel today, we have joined Rika Nakazawa, our very own Group Vice President of NTT's New Venture and Innovation and Head of NTT's Sustainability Practice in the Americas. And our moderator, Marguerite Gong-Hancock, is the Vice President of Innovation and Programming and Director of the Exponential Center of the Computer History Museum here in the Bay Area. They're going to discuss how the emoji has combined art and technology to transform how we communicate direct from all of our devices. And what's more, has made an incredible impact on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And with that, we hope that you'll use some of these hashtags here to raise awareness of how innovation, art, and technology can contribute and support diversity, equity, and inclusion. If, for those on the live chat, would have any questions, please feel free to put them in the live chat. And for our audience at the end, you'll be able to ask questions of the panel. And with that, Marguerite.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to add my warm welcome to each of you here in person as well as online. If you think about it, since the Stone Age, when people were drawing on cave walls, all the way through to today, people have been using visual symbols to communicate, to connect, to express who they are. So it's very natural that as our medium changed from stone to paper to digital screens, that so too have those visual languages. And as we think about it, many consider emoji the first language of our digital age. Who has used a thumbs up today? Woo! A heart? Smile with the tears coming out. Well, you're not alone. You're in good company. It's estimated now that more than 50% of the posts on Instagram include emoji, and then 92% of the world's online community use emoji. So as we think about it, the questions we have today are, how did emojis start here with NTT? How has it evolved over time to reflect the online global community? And what might be the future? So I'd love to jump in first with you, Rika. And as we think about World Emoji today, could you take us back to 1999 when NTT invented the emoji? What was the technology landscape at the time? How did those constraints spur some innovation? And so how and why did NTT create this particular form of communication?
Yeah, thanks, Marguerite. So 1999, you mean like when I was 5?
Well, I don't even think you were born yet.
Okay. Right. That's right. So actually, I moved back to Japan in 1999. I'm born and raised in Tokyo. And I was working in LA, working in digital in the first .com era. So now you know I wasn't born in 1999. And I moved back to Japan, and that year, NTT Docomo launched iMode. And I was obsessed. Because back then in the States, the phones were WAP, very rudimentary. And considering the mobile phone was first launched in 1973, and the first text message was sent in 1992, So 1999, when iMode launched the iPhone, it was really quite groundbreaking. And dare I say that iMode preceded iTunes. And I know that's heresy here, right? I know that I'm probably getting some flame emojis right now online. So I think, with the emoji, and it was pronounced emoji. And emoji in Japanese is picture, sort of kanji or character, picture, character, emoji. And it just so happens it sounds like emo for emotional, which people remember emoticons when emoticons were first coming out. So emoji, that was created by NTT Docomo, was really Kurita-san and Sasahara-san at NTT Docomo, was a way to overcome constraints of how do you bring in humanity, how do you bring in emotion, how do you bring in things that words can possibly say into that bits and bytes, sort of a little bit more two-dimensional form of early days of the mobile devices. And so that was really the time, and it coming from Japan, being Japanese, I completely understand, because in Japan, comic books aren't just for kids. Comic books are read by adults. I remember getting on the trains and seeing these older Japanese men reading comic books. It was kind of, unusual, but the point is that the language is very expressive through words, and kanji itself are pictures of things. So if you look at a ki, which is the kanji for tree, it looks like a tree. So it was very organic for that transition to happen, and for NTT Docomo to come up with picture characters as a way to bring in more rich expressions of communication into that form of digital communications.
Great, thank you so much. Well, Ying, you're an artist, and as you think about Kurita-san's marrying of art and technology, his set of original 176 emoji are now part of the Museum of Art, right?
Yes.
So how do you think about this connection of the creative part of art with technology that led to this new communication as an artist?
Absolutely. I love the question. It's very interesting. I'm kind of a word nerd. I love researching into words. I actually recently discovered the word art is originated, guess what? The Greek word techne. So if you really think about it, there's a very intricate, almost like similarity between art and tech. In fact, it's the same thing. If you think about all the artists that being displayed tonight, it's their technique of expression of the human spirit. That was the way that we communicate via the canvas. And I do think that I love Matt Mullenweg says the newest form of the technologists are actually poets using the codes. So I really don't see it as a separation between art and technology. In fact, it's intertwined in so many ways. Without the technology, I was using Adobe softwares to do all the works. Without the technology, without computer, I will not be able to have the conversation with the masters. But at the end of the day, I think technology is extension of our human spirit. Technology is supposed to be our way to communicate with a bigger audience and connect with everyone. And I think often the traditional way of expression, which is language, has barriers. And emoji is a super language. It's transcending the linguistic barrier. It really is breaking down the human geographic location and a lot of times the language barriers. And it's a new form of communication, which echoing NTT Docomo Sasahara-san's word, NTT's goal is not only just business itself, but also enhance the human experience. So really happy that we're doing it tonight.
Yeah, this amplification of humanity through technology has been core, really, to what we are not only creating tools, but using them in ways that can really benefit others. And as we think about the evolution of the online population, millions, billions, literally, have come online since 1999. And we think about it, now we have more than 5 billion people that are online in the world, and which is more than 60% of the world's global population. So one challenge has been to have emoji evolve so that it can reflect this new diversity of the population. I'd like to ask you, Rika, why do you think this is important?
Well, it's very important as somebody who grew up with a German mother, Helga. So whatever you just thought, that's probably my mother. And then Masujiro, who's a very small Japanese man. So grew up with two very different cultures. And I can tell you that In English, there were times that they would say the same thing, but they meant something different from each other.
Yeah.
So I think for different cultures, the opportunity to be able to contextualize what it is that you're trying to say through the art form of the expression of something that's rooted within that culture. Like when we heard that Yiying is the designer, the artist for the dumpling and the boba, you both got thirsty and hungry at the same time, I'm sure. But it's and also, you know, for people that come from the Asians backgrounds like the three of us here, that's something that's remarkable, and it's something that we can feel very, very deeply personal. And there's also universality, as Yiying was saying, about emoji. So, for example, I think one of the ways that emoji became quite popular during the pandemic is because during the pandemic, we were all masked.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity to use emoji to do a smiley face and the crying smiley face and the, you know, smiling so hard that your eyes are squinting smiley face, these were all ways that we found cues to be able to communicate with each other in ways that we couldn't even in person. And so I think that especially for cultures and as more people come online.
Yeah.
And that's still startling, isn't it? That only 65% of the world is online. I thought that the number would easily be higher by now, especially with the pandemic, because that's what created a significant surge in digitization of assets and digitalization of processes. But if there's only still less than 65% of the world online, and all those languages and all those cultures have yet to come online and to be part of this ecosystem of how we communicate, not ecosystem of technology, but how we communicate and how we prosper and thrive as a global community is going to be really important and critical. So Yiying is going to be very busy because she's going to be designing and creating more emojis up to come. She and I are going to collaborate on some sustainability ones, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, it's critically important for communication and how we unify together around a global village.
Thank you. Well, here, right now at the Computer History Museum, we actually have a 27-foot wall that's called Little Story, Little Emoji, Big Story, that talks about the evolution of emoji. And if you think about it, in the last years, emoji have been able to reflect different skin color, different gender, different definitions of family, different cultural identity. And Ian, you have personal experience in being able to successfully advocate for expanding the lexicon of emoji. Could you choose a story to tell us about how did that happen?
Absolutely. I love the question. Well, which one do you want to hear? I'm going to start with the dumpling because that's where I ended up being here, actually. It was kind of amazing because I was born and raised in Shanghai, China, educated in Sydney, Australia, and London, UK. That's why I have a very decentralized accent. I call it the Yi-English. I initially came here to the Bay Area in 2009, February, because I did a whale. I drew a whale, and it became this little small startup you probably heard of called Twitter. So every single time when Twitter goes down, people see the whale. But if you think about it, that's kind of my emoji entryway to the Silicon Valley, because I created this whale. It somehow, in a way, it's also a representation of the arrow page. But what's really amazing is 2015, I decided to move here. And at the time, it was my first time living full-time in San Francisco. And I was invited by my friend, Jenny A. Lee, who was inviting me to her house to have dumplings. And I realized there's no dumpling emoji on my phone keyboard. I was like, how is this even possible? This is a universal food. So I was like, wait a minute, I'm a designer. I have imagination. I can do this. So I went back to my table and I, just made a first version, with the beta version of the dumpling. It's supposed to be animated with hard eyes. I call it the bling bling dumpling because it blings. So I sent it over to her and she's like, why don't we publish this? And then we did some research and find out there's actually a nonprofit called the Unicode Consortium. And it's based in the Silicon Valley. And it was actually like a group of really amazing linguistic people. A lot of them are coming from Apple, Google, Facebook, and everybody is doing it as their nonprofit effort. And they actually have all these Unicode technical committee meetings like every month. So we actually went over to IBM and submitted the dumpling proposal. And around the same time, they also came to me. They said, oh, we love your dumpling proposal. But in the meantime, we have chopstick, fortune cookie, takeout box. and we have proposal people submitted, but we don't have art. Would you be able to do it? I mean, at the time, it's not my job, it's not my career, it's my calling. So I went back to my place and I started to design all these emojis. So that was how initially it got accepted in early 2016. And the next thing you know, I also was submitting the boba tea emoji, but it was rejected. Can you believe it? In 2015, it was rejected because we didn't have enough data to prove the importance of the drink. I know. And then 3 years later, we have a bunch of data scientists, actually amazing. I think some of them are in tonight. You can probably meet them. I'll try to find them. But the 3 data scientists actually reached out to me via the email, and they say, hey, we actually have data. As we scrape the data from the public data on Google Analytics, and we have the geographic location and the importance compared with sake and red wine, and they did all these theses. It's almost like a PhD thesis, I'm not joking. So that's how we ended up having the boba tea emoji got approved in 2020, literally during the pandemic, together with the Alepa emoji, who's actually a designer from Airbnb, Lumen, who's actually being featured at the Computer History Museum as well to represent the Latinx community. And so that's how I ended up really kind of, I met Marguerite at the Computer History Museum in 2016, and I know Rika since 2013, and that's how everything sort of coming together. I even met Shigetaka Kurita-san, who initially did the very first set of emoji online on Zoom during the pandemic with my dad. So I really think emoji is a new way to bring people together. For me, someone who is born and raised in Asia, and I would never imagine in a million years that I will be actually sitting here in San Francisco talking about emoji with you guys. So I really think it's a way, and I think it is a real, actual symbolism of globalization.
Well, speaking of globalization, emoji are part of every facet of communication, not just our cultural lives, but also business and work now. According to the 2022 US Emoji Trend Report, which surveyed 5,000 US emoji users, 68% said they like it when their coworkers use emoji at work, and 69% said emoji use positively impacts their coworkers' likability. And 79% agree using emoji can help users quickly share ideas. So you better be using emoji in your work life. Rika, I would love to hear some examples that or a story that you might give about how emoji is affecting the workplace.
Well, it's as we're talking about, it is a way to amplify communication and make it much richer and also more fun. I was very delayed coming in today. I lived in Silicon Valley for 17 years, and then I moved to Austin, Texas with half of California, I think, at one point. About 2 years ago, so I flew in today, and through a sequence of circumstances got really delayed. And then I was like, well, this should be fun. I'm going to just communicate my update just through emoji. So I had just landed at SFO, and I was running to get to my rent-a-car. And I was able to express that in like 3 emojis. It was awesome. But no, in all seriousness, in terms of really creating a way to be able to build relationships and to be able to foster that sense of humanity, especially during the pandemic when there was a lot of stress and ways of remote working was a huge challenge for a lot of people. I think emojis was a tremendous salve and a panacea for ways that people are going to find a way to communicate and to be able to express themselves in ways that they couldn't otherwise. Now, how it's used in business and legally is also a very interesting question. So just recently, if any of you saw this, there was a case in Canada where a farmer and a businessman were doing a transaction, and the farmer had, one side or the other gave a thumbs up to communication, which went to court because it was one side thought it was just, yes, I got your message, but the other person received it as confirmation for a bid price on a commodity. And that case won, so the farmer got to get paid for that thumbs up because of that way that was interpreted by the law. So I think it's really important for us to think about how emoji is going to become more and more part of how we communicate. I'm venture to say that you might see more and more emojis coming into esteemed news articles that you might not otherwise see in the New York Times or Washington Post or otherwise. More and more blogs and ways that people are publishing are going to be using emojis because, again, it's a way to create a multifaceted experience of communication. And at the same time, you do have to be careful. If you saw my LinkedIn post today where I said counting down, just to be next to these two extraordinary women, and then I said plus my emoji for the day, and I was choosing one, and then after I posted it, I was like, oh, I don't know, and it was a heart on fire. And then I thought, okay, I mean that in the best possible way, but then I had like Indiana Jones in my head, and then I had like all these like different, and I was like, I work in sustainability, so things on fire aren't very, but then I just left it because it was my first instinct to be like, oh, I'm so excited and so passionate about this topic. So yes, we should embrace the opportunity to also bring in additional emojis into the lexicon and the vernacular, but at the same time, just be mindful of how people might interpret it and know that there might be some legal precedent still coming down the road.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's consider what might be ahead. We've talked about how emoji have evolved, and Ying, there's still so much work to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a similar survey asked US emoji users, and Black, Asian, Latinx, and other people said 41% said they don't feel adequately represented. It's not just ethnic backgrounds, it's accessibility, it's all kinds of other things. Yeah. So as you consider what might be ahead, how do you see emoji evolving in the next few years, maybe 5 years from now? What might that lingua franca of our age become?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for the question. I think that one quote I really liked is from Masha McLuhan, which is, "The medium is the message." And I do think that the emoji is a medium. And yet the emoji itself, the lexicon itself actually carries the message, which in this case, when we were submitting the boba tea emoji, for example, when the boba tea emoji got added to the emoji keyboard, or the dumpling emoji added to the keyboard, I remember I was speaking in Toronto, and I was speaking about cross-cultural communication and innovation. And one audience came to me, I remember very vividly. He said, "Hey, I'm a Asian Canadian born and raised in Canada. It's really great to see the food is being represented on the keyboard." And I think that it was also very amazing because of the emoji project I've been doing. I get connected to a lot of change makers. If you go to the Computer History Museum in the future, you'll be able to see on this 27-foot tall wall, there's Katrina, who actually created the 5-screen emoji idea in the first place, which all the other platforms implemented. And Lumen, I mentioned early on, invented the arepa emoji, and also Riof, who invented the hijab emoji, giving visibility to millions of Muslim women. And also Paul Hunt from Adobe, who invented the gender-neutral emoji, who also adding and expanding the gender inclusivity conversation through emojis. And also, obviously, Jennifer and myself, we worked on several emoji projects together. But emoji is universal. It's a universal language. And the fact that everybody here, you get the chance to actually adding the emoji keyboard. Each one of you have the capacity to actually adding your proposal. If you want to collaborate, you can go to the Emojipedia. It's a nonprofit, and you can find a person to collaborate. And I do believe when we have a more diverse lexicon, it gives more visibility to different communities. Because we know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. It's like food. So if you've never tried boba tea, go try it tonight. This is kind of my way of metaphor, which is, in a lot of ways, language itself, just like food, you have to expand your palate. And that's what we're here for, to add more menu items onto the menu.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, it'll be a chance to involve all of you, both here in the room as well as online, with questions. But I'd like to turn to Eureka as we close where we began. We were really thinking about NTT and this innovation and creativity and technology with humanity at its core, and not just a single definition, but a broad, inclusive, diverse definition of humanity. Where do you envision this kind of innovation going forward, and what might be the potential power for new kinds of inclusive communication as we look ahead?
Yeah. Well, we are infinitely visual individuals, humans, people, and animals here and creatures here on Earth. And so in some ways, a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've all heard that. And a picture is worth 1,000 feelings, smells, and senses, and full stomachs from all the food. And so, you know, and as I think about the emoji as well, I think about logos, because it creates an emotional reaction, right? At some of them anyway, whether good or bad. You think of the swoosh, the Nike logo, you think of the Apple logo. There's different visual representations that evoke a feeling or some response, an idea. And so that was the intentionality that we had at NTT in designing our logo, which I have 2 of them here on my smiley face. They're earrings on my emoji here. And the logo is intentional. It's a small circle within a larger circle, but it's created an infinite loop. And the story behind that is really saying that the inside where NTT sits is part of the larger community of our customers and our partners and of the total ecosystem. And as Yiying said, for us here at NTT, we are infinitely responsible for our presence in the world of technology, but also as pioneers. As Megan was saying, we invest heavily in R&D, and we have a responsibility for how we think about that holistically. And in the same vein, our role that we play in the world of digitalization and digital infrastructure and all the different ways that physical and virtual are converging, there's a lot that's happening. We all know metaverse, it's not gone, it's still here. I know some people are glad to hear that. But so metaverse, virtual worlds, digital twins, all the different ways that we're going to use technologies and AI to be able to create representations for us to live better lives, for us to live more harmoniously. All of those things are going to be part of the innovation landscape moving forward. So does that mean that we'll have AI that will help us create 3-dimensionalized emojis of ourselves in a metaverse? I think that's a little bit too many words in a sentence from technology speak. But I think that there is going to be this notion of us thinking about our avatars, our digital representations of ourselves that is multifaceted and has so many expressions and various ways that we can be our authentic self, and to be able to express that in a way that people can understand and want to work, live, play, and to innovate and to invent and thrive together. And that's what we're committed to here at NTT, is to be able to be part of that community, part of that commitment, and continue to drive forward and be pioneers around how we make a better tomorrow, and to make sure that we're good stewards for the broader community inside and outside of our homes.
Ulrika and Yiying, wonderful to talk with both of you. Thank you. Back over to you, Megan.
Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, back over to you for questions.
Do we have any questions? So far, nothing on LinkedIn Live.
Hi, thank you for this. This is amazing. First, this is a question from a friend. When are we getting an egg tart emoji? And then the other question is the evolution of emojis. So one example is the prayer hands. But there was this thought that they were giving a high five, or there's all these interpretations. You put something out there and you think it's so obvious, and then people come up with a million different other interpretations, and now when you're saying thank you, you send the prayer hands, not a high five. So just your thoughts on the evolution of how people interpret the images that are there, and maybe taking on a whole new level.
Egg tart.
Oh my God. Everybody's just gonna get me hungry. I honestly thank you so much for the question. If you get the chance, check the Emoji Nation and see if it's already being submitted, because so many people are already submitting different ideas, and if haven't, you should definitely talk to someone and collaborate. Because also, you remember, you gotta get the data. You gotta prove the importance. And going back to your question, I think it's inevitable. It's just like language. When I created the dumpling emoji, I would have no idea someone is gonna use dumpling to symbolize their soon-to-born baby. When I met a mom, she's like, you know, I use dumpling all the time. I use it to refer to my baby who's due like in 2 months. So, I mean, that's not something I would be able to, know. Like when people do like all sorts of different, like, when people combine the frog with the tea bag, it's like Kermit the Frog, none of my business. That was a language, and I think that's really amazing, because that's the community effort. And I think I'm actually really excited to see that. I mean, I'm pretty sure Hokusang will have no idea one day his work is going to be remixed with a bunch of all skin color emojis representing California wave here, even though it's coming from Japan. And that's how I think it's really great when there's interactivity. And that's engagement. And that's what I'm really excited about. It's not a one-side communication. I think what's really amazing is the language itself become evolving as the community coming to engage with each other. And I guess that's the essence of Web 3 compared with Web 1 or Web 2, is the community interactivity. And nothing can stop it. Let's face it, we have boba tea emoji now.
So when Ying and I first sat down and we were saying, oh, you know, we have three Asian women on the stage. That's so awesome. And I went over to fist bump her, and she went to high five me. So we
I
did
was like,
this.
it's a turkey.
We just three-dimensionalized your question. So my point around that is that I think those create opportunities for better understanding. And we all have to, and I think the pandemic permitted this for a hot second for some people, and then kind of people went back. But it created a moment where we could all be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And not that we can all be vulnerable all the time, but my point is when there's a misunderstanding, to take advantage of that opportunity to be vulnerable, to say, okay, I'm going to create a space to better understand. So what we did was we just started cracking up and just like, you know. So, you know, I think it's a beautiful thing when there can be a misunderstanding that both, it's the anti-fragile thing, right? It just helps the breakdown make both sides stronger.
My question's kind of like a follow-up question. Is there like a dictionary of what the terms are? Because I was talking to a friend recently. She goes, I don't know what they mean. And so like if there's a dictionary that has like what they're supposed to be, and was the eggplant emoji, what's behind that? Was that just supposed to be a vegetable, or was there?
I'm going to answer the eggplant one, but is that chocolate ice cream emoji? No, it's not.
Also, the poop emoji, fun fact, the poop emoji, when they invent the poop emoji, it was if you look closer, it's the same emoji on the ice cream.
That's right.
It's the same shape. So if you look at, if you look at the poop, it's basically the chocolate ice cream. It's open to interpretation. Yes. 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 Everything's open to interpretation.
So you talked about the significance of introducing other skin tones a number of years ago, but I would like to speak on behalf of an unrepresented class globally, and that is white wine drinkers. Oh. When are they going to introduce a white wine emoji?
So
We'll bring it to the emoji.
I'll just say a word, just in answer to that slightly seriously. So the Unicode subcommittee for emoji, there is a process. There are people who are voting members. They entertain all applications, and there is a process for these. So if you'd like to submit it, the next release will be in September. They'll be releasing some new emoji. We'll be celebrating it at the Computer History Museum release day. But also, one of the big emphasis is thinking about how you combine emoji together. And the direction and sequence matters. So that's something when you're thinking about creating a language, it's not just creating individual pieces, but how does the syntax matter? So there are people, as Ying said, who are involved with linguistics, who are in a very serious way thinking about this language for all of us.
I mean, I feel it's interesting. I think it's interesting because different groups of people will use emojis a different way. In the gay community, you know, there's a whole bunch of, you know, symbols that are used regularly in chats, you know, just to label yourself. I'm curious, is there NTT started with a 175? 176.
One more.
Do you think there's going to be too much at some point? Or how do we keep track of everything? And then the other question I think it's very important to talk about is three-dimensionality of it. I think the barrier for pictures to express emotion and then something that's more 3D, I feel like the expectation is higher. The threshold for something that's almost robotic to express emotion is harder. And I feel like there, in the metaverse, if we were to assign an avatar to, it doesn't. I don't know if we're going to be able to feel that same emotion that we can do in face-to-face conversations like this one.
Yeah, another beautiful mechanism used by the Japanese is haiku. But some of you know that it's an art form of poetry, and it's a 575 syllable form of a poem, which is very challenging. Less is more.
Yeah.
Right? And so I would want to agree with you that is there a point where it becomes too much? Because then, you know, as humans do better with fewer choices, right? So, but I think at the same time, we need to allow for the expression of individuality to come forward. And I think where it starts to get a little bit weird, and I'm not, you know, black mirroring this session here today, but there is a little bit of, okay, so what happens when we have AI start to be able to create some expressions that we don't otherwise know how to create or to represent what it is? So, I mean, all that, you know, notwithstanding, I think we're still, you know, still plenty of opportunity to create emojis that are representing different experiences, if nothing other than to introduce people to something that they don't know, which is always a remarkable way for us to be able to extend our humanity and communication to other people. But
Great answer. And to ask your question, is there too much of emoji? And if you think about it, the definition of emoji is picture language, right? Drawing language, emoji. 绘文字 in Mandarin Chinese, because kanji is Chinese characters. To me, I think this, in a way, as the technology advancement, you have virtual avatars, you have more sensory experiences through the virtual world. How do you know you're not an AI having a human experience? I'm just going to leave the question to you. But going back to emoji, I think it's, I love one quote. It says, more is more, less is more. So yeah. So look at her. She's a piece of art. So if anything, I think just like food, more is more. You can try more food, and you know, I love fish and chips, but you know what? We also have sushis and dumplings, and also all kinds of different dumplings, momos, empanadas, kwapalech for Jewish community. And the more you try, the more you actually get to know the diverse regions of people. It's like you're actually open up your sensory to experience the world more holistically. I mean, why not?
one thing I will say is, can we stop with the acronyms? Last week I got that's going to more. Like that's going too much. I had somebody send me HAGW on Teams. Anybody know what HAGW is?
Holding hands while talking. Yep.
Have a good weekend. Oh gosh, no! Stop.
So I only learned recently of YOLO, right? You only live once. But anyway.
But do you?
Yeah, maybe 7 lives of a cat, right? In a summary form, I think that you are very innovative, and I'm excited by all of that you're trying to embrace. I want to go back to I'm typically cerebral. I love the visual and the connection, of course, but I tend to operate on a cerebral level. And something that you mentioned, I just want to get a little bit more context. You mentioned that 41% still feel underrepresented. And can you just give a little bit of data, because I'm also a data geek, right? And I just want to understand, because I learned today for the first time that 65% of the world is online. So that's 35% that are not. But for the 41% that feel underrepresented, is this an online community? And you've already impressed me that you're doing a lot to mitigate or minimize that, but can you speak to that a little bit? Thank you.
Yeah, that's data from the annual US Emoji survey that's actually conducted by Adobe every year. And they surveyed 5,000 US emoji users. And so that's from the US emoji population.
So they're online emoji users.
Yes.
41% of those feel underrepresented.
Yes.
So
Work to do.
we've got many challenges ahead.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We on that vein, we have a question online as well about how the older community might be experiencing the use of emojis and maybe not use them as much because they aren't quite sure what they mean.
Yeah. I actually have a story I'd like to share. One person I met, his father is a lawyer. And one thing that was really interesting is she said that once her father discovered emoji and also memoji and GIF animation, it opens up a whole another world of the family to understood the father better. Because they've never, because the father works with words all the time. And the normal English words are the means of his work, right? So he's extra cautious when he uses the English wordings. So when he sent text, he would send long text. But once he discovered emoji, memoji, and also animated GIF, he was able to show a very playful side, which the family never get access to. And I would love to invite everybody to kind of look at this and also started to experiment this with your elderly folks. And I think this is also a way for everybody to get in touch with their inner children, inner self. And I think that we don't grow older and we forget about that little someone who we are. We actually collect ages. We don't lose age, we collect age. So no matter if you're 90 or if you're 19, that 6-year-old is always with you. And I think emoji is opening up that conversation with that 6-year-old or 4-year-old.
Speaking of my mother, who is permanently 16 years old in her head. I love you, Mom.
Helga.
Helga. So she speaks 5 languages. She's Scrabble champion of any region you drop her into. And I remember a couple years ago, I was talking to her, she said, I can't believe what just made Oxford Dictionary's word of the year.
Yeah.
This is like 2016, somewhere around there. I was like, okay, Scrabble Queen, what is it? And she said, it's a emoji. And I said, really? And she said, yes, it's the one where they're crying and smiling at the same time. I was like, oh, the crying smiley face emoji. She's like, yeah, how is that a word of the year? I said, well, I mean, it's just an expression of the times. You know, there's new words going into the dictionary all the time, so emoji going into the dictionary and being word of the year, not so surprising. But then my mother paused and she said something like, you know, I just can only hope that every person on the earth has a chance to have that feeling. I was like, wow, Mom. Thanks, Mom.
All right, I have 2 questions. What's your favorite emoji, and what emoji is missing from the emoji dictionary that you really want to say? Mine is microchip, because sometimes us tech people talk about microchips, and I have to use a gear icon, which is not the same. But yeah.
You use an ear icon?
Gear.
Oh, okay.
And it's like kind of close. Like when we type out specs for like tech stuff, I can do like filing cabinet for storage, a RAM for RAM, like different things like that. So I use them very creatively, but like the microchip is it's a reacher. So yeah. So what's missing? What do you like? What's your favorite? And what's missing?
We just have to set the record straight. Are we talking about potato chips or taro chips or?
Yeah, microchip. Like when we talk about tech. So, well, that's a good one. I can. Yeah, we need like a Lay's potato chip in there.
We need potato chips and taro.
I like that.
I honestly, it's really hard for me because I'm biased because I made those emojis. But I gotta say, obviously, dumpling is universal. Boba tea is also. By the way, the tapioca is not from Asia. The tapioca is from South Africa. So it's also really amazing, the boba tea itself. So I think I will vote for boba tea because the boba tea itself is a real symbolism of globalization. Many of you don't know, the boba, the tapioca, is actually from South America. It's the cassava tree, it's the plant. And it was 15th, 16th century when the European explorers brought those cassava plant to Asia. And that's how the Asian desserts have these kind of chewy, like whether it's Vietnam or Philippines, this is all because of all the explorers coming from South America. So boba tea and the milk tea itself also is another really funny story, is because when after the Opium War, the British Empire got the silk and tea from China. And at the time, they didn't really know how to drink tea properly. It's not like you can just get onto YouTube and figure out like how Chinese people drink tea. So they send ambassadors to China. And at the time, the Chinese dynasty, as you know, they changed different dynasties. It just so happened it's the opening of the Qin dynasty. And the Qin dynasty are actually Manchurians. They're like shepherds. So they put milk in everything. They have like milk tea. So the ambassadors saw they put milk in the tea. They're like, oh, that's how Chinese people drink tea. And so they're like, Your Majesty, let's just put milk in our black tea. And that is actually how it's getting popularized in Britain, and it becomes the milk tea culture. So if you really kind of think about it, nowadays you go to a boba tea shop, you see kids from all kinds of different ethnicities coming together, share a boba tea. The Opium War, which is around the same time of World War I, was caused because the trade imbalance between silk and tea. If you think about it, today we can sit in a room, drinking boba tea. It's real symbolization of the harmony we're creating. So to that, I hope I answer your question.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
What is your name? What is your name?
Matt.
Okay,
Thank
Matt.
you, Matt.
So I'll answer your question. And you brought out my inner nerd. I worked for NVIDIA for a few years, back in 2006. And so I'm happy to say that I watch various kinds of shows that bring that inner. So Mythic Quest, anybody here ever watch Mythic Quest? Okay. There's an episode in there where she's creating a new segment of a game, and she's calling it Dinner Party. She's going like this to explain it, right? To like inspire people to a dinner party. And we do the jazz hands. And so I think my favorite emoji, and how I got to that realization, because we did have this as a question that we had prepped actually for the session, was the inability to capture this in words.
Yeah.
And so mine is is a sparkle.
Yeah.
Because I think that everything goes back to energy, not just because I'm in sustainability, but I think we're all vibration and we're all energy. And that sparkle emoji, not the star one. The star one's good. Star one's great. But the sprinkle one that kind of like has you following it to the next person that you share the energy with, and then you go, that's my favorite, because that really encapsulates it. So.
Love it.
Thank you.
I like it. Thank you.
I thought you were going to say jazz hand.
No. Jazz hands is good.
My question is, I have noticed that certain celebrities or billionaires seem to propel certain emojis into popularity mode, aka the poop emoji. When you think poop emoji these days, one name pops up, which is Elon Musk. So have you seen certain trends in different cultures where celebrities are using some emojis more that helps propel that emoji?
That's a very specific question.
Is there a
Any
Cybertruck
thoughts?
emoji
Yeah,
like
I'm
that?
not- I'm
I wonder. Is there like it's like a truck with a poop on it? Is that like?
Yeah.
Now I really have some haters on my. It's a good question though.
Yeah, thank you.
You talked a lot about the diversity reflected in the different colors and things like that. I'm just curious, because I've been doing a lot of research because I'm writing an article about neurodiversity in engineering teams. Do you anticipate, or I don't know if there's anything out there, because there's a lot of underrepresented people on the spectrum,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to emoji. Do you anticipate that there might be something like that, and is there even a need for it? Because I'm trying to raise awareness of how effective neurodiverse people can be, especially in engineering teams. So I don't know. I'm trying to imagine a scenario, but I'm going to throw it out to you all.
So, as a kid, I read a lot of supernatural books. Thanks again, Mom. A lot of different books in the house. And I used to always think, okay, I'm going to read this person's mind. I'm going to read this person's mind, and I would try to do this thing and telekinesis and all these things. And then when you were asking the question, I was thinking, if spectrum and the extent, like where we go to with that, is really people being able to, and there people already can do some of that, right? There's examples of people being able to know what somebody else is thinking. Is that communication going to be in words or pictures? We don't know, right? Because when I remember about my dreams, I actually don't remember language. I remember the visuals, right? So that's, sorry, that's not an answer. It's just me like.
Thanks for the perspective.
Just thinking.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for the question. One thing I think it was really exciting in 2016 when we had the first Emoji Con. I know there's an Emoji Con in San Francisco. We actually had scientists came together, and they together submitted like the DNA emoji and the specter. Like all those things were actually submitted in real time here in the Westfield Mall back in 2016. And I do believe that if we can bring people from different sectors, from my own personal experience, I work with startups and founders and tech communities all over. I don't consider myself as a pure artist. I actually also consider myself as an entrepreneur and technologist. And I think that there is no reason why we cannot be multidimensional beings. You can be an aunt, a mom, and also a corporate exec. But in the same time, you can be a student who's doing improv and who's learning how to cook on a weekend. And so I actually think that it's really amazing. Google actually championed for the women, female representation in different jobs. So in the past, what female representation in emoji was only available as a princess, as seriously, as a dancer. No, I'm not joking. This is actually real, going back 7 years ago. And then Google actually championed for women as a teacher. And now you have women as a lab scientist, women as an astronaut, women not only as a dancer, but also as an athlete, a runner. So those are the things I think as time expand, we have more people join in the conversation, and that's how we can make change. Just like food, again, expanding the menu.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Hi, I had one question. Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been incredible hearing all of you talk. Like, your minds are incredible, and I really appreciate your artistic mindset when it comes to technology and emojis. Thinking more about like inclusivity and talking about there's a lot of work to be done in expanding inclusivity and diversity within the lexicon of emoji. And then I was also thinking about the way in which new emojis are created. It has to go through the committee, and then it has to be data supported that it's important enough to be included. And these feel like kind of opposing contradictions of like, if a minority needs to be included to have more diversity, maybe it's not as easy to advocate for themselves, and maybe the data is not focused on supporting them. So how do you, as a company who creates emojis, how do you mitigate that contradiction?
That's a good question.
Did somebody plant you to? Well, inclusivity is important, and the process. There always has to be a process until you have the opportunity for decentralization, right? And I think that's Web3. People are starting to talk about Web4. So rather than having to be within the box of Apple or Android or some of these other operating systems, the opportunity for people to create a democratized way of expression would be amazing and beautiful. But before we get there, it's first about having their voice heard before their visual representation is brought into the whole library, right? And so I think that's what we focus on a lot at NTT, the digital divide. We work with cities, we work with communities to be able to get more of the 65% that are not, I can't do math, 35%. The 35% that are not online, right? Or there's a lot of people who have phones, mobile phones, but not all of them are smartphones, right? So enabling people to have access to information is first, and then from there, I think that community will be able to create the subsets that then create that inclusive environment within the ecosystems that they're operating in. But yeah, I think it's a big challenge, and I'm not going to speak on behalf of 330,000 people within NTT, but I can say that we share a spirit of collaboration, inclusivity, and expression in a way that is going to further humanity. And to the extent that we can help do that, we will. I think that all of us in this room feel empowered that if we feel like somebody is not being heard or silenced, that's brought to the surface, right?
With that, I think that was a fantastic question to close on. Thank you so much for joining us on LinkedIn Live and